Hi, I'm Father Brian Brooks. I'm the pastor of the Church of St. Benedict here in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. And offer today's reflection on this Friday, August 21st. Today on the church calendar, it is the memorial of St. Pius X. He was Pope in the early part of the 20th century. This is also the feast day of our brothers and sisters of St. Pius X Parish and School in Tulsa, so we lift them up in prayer today. Pius was Pope again the first years of the 20th century. He dies in 1914. Pretty much as World War I breaks out. He had tried through the Vatican diplomatic corps to prevent the outbreak of war, and thought by some that he basically dies of a broken heart, in which to see Christian Europe at war with itself. Ramifications we're still living out of more than a century later. Pius X also had a great deal to do with restoring a devotion to the Eucharist, receiving Christ in the Eucharist, particularly beginning at an early age. Particularly the custom in our church that around the age of 7 or 8 or so that the children are able to make their first communion. That's a fairly recent practice or development in which we have St. Pius we're in his debt because of that. Because he wanted people to experience that love of Christ in the Eucharist as early as possible, particularly around the age of reason, around 7, 8 years old, when children begin to understand more of the concepts about God's love for them, particularly in the gift of the Eucharist. So this is what the meditation day about our labor and how we all have a responsibility, not just the clergy and the religious, but all of us who are baptized, responsibility in living the gospel and sharing the gospel with others. So this meditation is titled, Why We Labor. It is true, venerable brethren, that in this arduous task of the restoration of the human race in Christ, neither you nor your clergy should exclude any assistance. We know that God recommended everyone to have a care for his neighbor. For it is not priest alone, but all the faithful, without exception, who must concern themselves with the interest of God and souls. The times that we live in demand action, but action which consists entirely observing with fidelity and zeal the divine laws and precepts of the Church, and the frank and open profession of religion in the exercise of every kind of charitable work, without regard to self-interest or worldly advantage. Such luminous examples given by the great army of soldiers of Christ will be of much greater avail in moving and drawing men than words and sublime dissertations, and will easily come about that when human respect has been driven out and prejudice and doubting laid aside, large numbers will be won to Christ, becoming in their turn promoters of his knowledge and love, which are the road to true and solid happiness. Oh, when in every city and village the law of the Lord is faithfully observed, and when respect is shown for sacred things, when the sacraments are frequented and the ordinances of Christian life fulfilled, there will certainly be no need for us to labor further to see all things restored in Christ. Very interesting reflection that Pope Pius offers in that it's not by dissertations, not by maybe skillful argument, as valuable as that can be in theological discussions are. It's often by that lived witness and the willingness to share that witness, to share our story of faith with others, and not to be afraid of that, and not to leave that up to others, but as Pius says, all the faithful without exception must be concerned themselves with this interest, to share the good news with others, to tell your story of the gift of faith so that others can be touched by it and be drawn to Christ. So, God bless you and keep you safe.